For Crema Media's Polity, I'm Sane Dlamini. Author and filmmaker Toni Strasburg discusses her book titled Holding the Fort, A Family Torn Apart. This book, Toni, is about how you had to hold the baton while your parents were arrested or detained in 1960. Can you tell us why they were arrested and how the idea of this book started?
Well, they were arrested because they were politically active. They were in the South African Communist Party, in the ANC, although they were in those days there was like the white part of the ANC, and because, you know, apartheid and so on. So that's why they were arrested. What happened in 1960 after Sharpeville, which was a very seminal point in the history of the struggle in South Africa, changed everything. The government declared a state of emergency. And under the state of emergency, they could detain people without trial. And they arrested literally hundreds of people all over the country. I mean, from top to bottom. And my parents were amongst those who were arrested and detained. How the idea of the book? Well, as I say at the beginning of the book, when my mother died in 2006, my sister and I were going through her papers to send to the archive, and we came across a lot of her diaries. I mean, diaries over many, many, many years of her life. But this particular diary covers just the 3 months that they were detained. She started writing it on the first day that they were arrested, and she finished it when she was released, if you like. It was so it's a story with a beginning and an end. And what I think is interesting about it is that this was a bunch of, in Johannesburg anyway, because people were all over the country, a group of 30 white, middle-class, professional women who weren't going to put up with any nonsense. And the jail authorities literally didn't know what to do with them at that stage, because they'd never come across women like this.
If you can just tell us maybe one or two things that stood out for you while you were going through this journal.
Well, one of the things which, you know, you sort of know anyway, but reading it over and over again, is how desperately the women missed their children and how they worried about them and how difficult it was for them, because they didn't know how long they were going to be there. It was detention without trial. So they could be held there as long as the emergency lasted, and who knew how long. So, yeah, how much they missed their children, and really how organized they were as women. I mean, there were lots and lots and lots of men arrested, probably all in all many, many more men than women over the country. But this bunch of women organized themselves. They were defiant right from the beginning. And the men, nah, not so much, you know. It took them a while to get themselves together, and they didn't stand up in quite the same way as the women. So I thought that was amazing.
The period must have been hard, but it was comforting to read about the support you and your siblings received from family and friends. Can you tell us about that?
Well, you know, it's very disruptive. You can imagine. The police come, you know, at 3 o'clock in the morning and arrest your parents, and you have 4 children, and you've got to have somewhere to go. My mother phoned a friend, and the friend's husband was also being arrested, and she took us in. And she had her husband arrested. She had 2 children of her own, and now suddenly she has the 4 Bernstein children as well. It must have been very hard for her, but it was very disrupted for us as children. Your life is literally torn apart for that period anyway, and especially for the younger children. I was a little bit older, but my littlest brother was only 3. I couldn't understand why his mommy and daddy weren't there.
And you had to quickly assume now the role of being an adult while you were also a child.
Well, you know, I was a child. I was only 16, and yes, I took a lot of responsibility for the kids, and I felt responsible to my parents as well. But you know, when you're 16, you've got a teenage brain, and you're not altogether adult by any chance.
Can you also tell us about the meetings that were sometimes attended by black activists in your house and what you had to say to your friends who only regarded black people as their workers or helpers?
It wasn't so much the meetings, because the meetings after my parents were banned, which was quite early on, meetings took place clandestinely elsewhere. But we used to have, you know, people for lunch or tea, or, you know, colleagues coming to see my mother or father. I mean, people like Nelson Mandela and Walter Sisulu. And now, what's hard to explain to this generation now is how unusual it was to have a black person sitting in your living room. It was a horrifying idea to most white people. Absolutely horrifying. It seems completely mad when I say it now, but that was the reality. Now, I'd come home from school with girls from school who came from, you know, ordinary white backgrounds, and there would be a black man sitting at the dining table having lunch with my father. What do you say? Oh, well, he's just some kind of chief, you know.
Can you also tell us about the letters that you received from your parents?
Well, yeah, I think that's one of the things. One of the things about the book was that I've put in, as it were, 3 voices. It's my mother's diaries, but it's my voice as well, because my recollections, and a little bit of my father's voice. But what I really wanted to show was all the other stuff, my mother's sketches and the poems that she wrote for the women and children, and some of the letters to and from my parents to the children and back again. And I think those letters show that, you know, these are not just political activists, they're parents as well. Have you done your homework? You know, are you being a good boy? You know, the normal life of...
And what was it like when you had to visit your parents?
Well, you know, I was allowed to visit because I was 16. The others, the younger kids, weren't allowed to visit. And my aunt or my uncle used to take me to the prison. I was allowed to leave school early, two days a week, to go to the prison. I actually enjoyed going to the prison in a very weird kind of way. It felt very grown up to be going to this horrible place, if you know what I mean. And, you know, like I was with the grown-ups, and now I'm going to visit my parents in prison, and it felt, you know, it felt very, yeah, very, made me feel proud.
Was it hard seeing your parents incarcerated?
You know, it was so long ago, I can't, maybe it was, but I don't think so. But it's so long ago, I can't really remember. I think it was more exciting that I could see them, you know, and talk to them than hard. It was hard not having them at home. That was the hard part.
And your parents and many others were fighting against the injustices of the past. Do you think that maybe their work paid off if you look at South Africa today?
I knew you were going to ask that question. Everybody asks it. Well, yes and no, because they achieved what they were fighting for. And those who've taken over afterwards haven't always done justice by us who fought for it. And in some ways I feel that they've been betrayed.
And lastly, Toni, without giving too much away, what else will the readers get from this book?
Well, I think they get a picture of a short period of time, a long time ago in the struggle, of ordinary family and an ordinary family's life. This is not about heroes. It's not I was so-and-so in the struggle, or, you know, my wonderful deeds. It's just a story about 3 months in an ordinary family's life.
Thank you. That was author Toni Strasburg speaking to Crema Media's Polity about her book titled Holding the Fort, A Family Torn Apart.